Welcome back. You're watching Checkpoint. Thank you so much for staying with us. Implementation of the Competency-Based Curriculum, CBC, remains one of the most controversial and divisive education reforms process in Kenya. While Kenya has had not less than 5 education reform cycles, none has been talked about as much as the CBC, with opinion on how to implement it remaining divided. In tonight's special report, the CBC Riddle, Shadrack Mitty looks at the reform's journey and the challenges ranging from claims of hurried implementation, lack of consultations, and inadequate resources for its rollout and effective implementation. Take a look.
The ongoing education reforms are a culmination of several initiatives riding on the back of a series of task forces and commissions throughout the generations. The first major education reform after independence was in 1964, when the late President Jomo Kenyatta established a National Commission on Education, chaired by Professor Simeon Ominde, to align the education policies to the socio-economic needs of a new nation. It recommended the abolition of segregated education that classified schools along racial lines and sought to promote national unity. In 1976, the National Committee on Educational Objectives and Policies, led by the then Permanent Secretary for Education, Peter Gashadhi, was established to oversee the second round of education reforms. The intention was to find solutions to the growing mismatch between the demands of the emerging labor market and the system of education. The committee recommended for access to free primary education and review of the curriculum, methods of teaching, and transition from primary to secondary. However, its recommendations were never implemented. The third education reform was in 1981 through the Presidential Working Commission on the establishment of the second university in Kenya, chaired by Dr. Colin McKay. The commission recommended for the establishment of a second university and restructuring the system of education from 7423 to 844.
The thinking we had before is the thinking that we were modeling our education according to the British system of education, which was handed over to us. It was basically, do you know algebra, do you know history, do you know geography? And in fact, the history that we learned in our primary school between 1969 up to 1976 were based on the history of Europe, the history of the Americas, and the rest of Africa. We knew very little about our history. That is something which is very unique. Even in language, we were basically being taught to pronounce this the way the English, the way the British were speaking.
In 1986, the Presidential Working Party on Education and Manpower Training for the next decade and beyond, chaired by James Kamunge, oversaw the fourth round of education reforms. The Commission underscored the importance of education, training, and research on socio-economic development and industrialization. It supported the 844 system of education, especially its broadly based and vocationally oriented curriculum.
The emphasis was based on looking at life from the white-collar job perspective. So that, for example, when you are asking the children in early primary education, that they used to be asking questions like, what would you want to be when you finish school? Then you just shout, I would want to be a teacher, I would want to be a doctor, I would want to be a lawyer. But you realize that certain aspects of life which also control our thinking, like business, nobody thought about it. And that is how, when 844 curriculum was brought on board, it was meant to change our mindset, to look at the practical aspect of life. So when you leave school, you cannot just leave school with a certificate, but you leave with something you know.
The fifth education reform came in 1988 through a commission of inquiry into the education system in Kenya, chaired by Dr. David Koech. It focused on totally integrated quality education and training, TIQET. It also looked at accelerated industrial and technological redevelopment, lifelong learning and adaptation in response to the country's changing needs in a global environment. The Commission recommended that the 844 system be replaced with TIQET in order to enable Kenyan children attain the minimum of secondary education without going through restrictive procedures of examinations. The sixth education reform in 2013, chaired by Professor Douglas Odhiambo, sought to realign the education sector to the Constitution of Kenya, 2010. It recommended a flexible and comprehensive structure for Kenya's education system and curriculum reform, with specific competencies at every level of learning. The task force recommended a new structure of education comprising of 2 years of pre-primary, 6 years of primary, 6 years of secondary, and 2 years minimum of mid-level college and 3 years minimum university education. The current CBC reforms are founded on the Professor Odhiambo report. The 844 system of education has been in place for more than 30 years. The circumstances it was created to respond to have changed, informing the need to align Kenya's education system with the knowledge, skills, values, beliefs, globalization, and technology. The CBC system recognizes that learners have diverse abilities, interests, and inclinations.
Kenyans should know that the reforming of our education system since independence has always been cyclical. It has always been in circles. And as a researcher, you begin to ask why. Why have we never achieved this deep desire for skills and competences? And the answer is simple: economics. The economy of the country cannot hold an education, a basic education that has both knowledge acquisition and then development of skills and competences. So for us as educationists and researchers, what I would advise is that we intensify knowledge acquisition and begin to interest our students towards skills.
The competency-based curriculum places emphasis on the attainment of relevant skills. It has 7 core competency areas of communication and collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, imagination and creativity, citizenship, learning to learn, self-efficacy, and digital literacy. It also has core values of love, responsibility, respect, unity, peace, patriotism, social justice, and integrity. The 26333 curriculum was launched in 2017 on pilot in lower primary and rolled out in phases from grade 1 and 2. For the successful implementation of the CBC, it was paramount that teachers be adequately prepared. However, from a sample study of 410 schools in 45 counties, it was established that just 42% of teachers were ready and had the knowledge to teach and deliver on CBC.
We looked at the level of implementation of CBC. When we walked into the classes, it was around 42%. In other words, teachers had not internalized the concepts and the constructs of CBC. So at 42%, it becomes a big worry for a national pilot, if you are a statistician like me.
With an approval rating of about 80%, the competency-based curriculum had the majority backing at its pilot rollout. According to the evaluation report by external evaluators, majority of the country expressed the desire for a curriculum shift.
What did Kenyans think of CBC? What was the attitude of the teachers surrounding CBC? And in the pilot study that I conducted, 78% of the respondents wanted a change from 844.
Proponents of change cited overload in 844 and heavy emphasis on exams and wastages.
Every year, when we release the Form 4 results, we would have since 2016, over 460,000 learners getting D+ and below, and nobody thinks about them. We talk about the 20% and we say our education system is doing wonderfully well, without appreciating the large number that we are wasting, and they are part and parcel of this community.
Yet, even as debate on the suitability and acceptability of the competency-based curriculum continues, it is now clear it was hurriedly rolled out. An evaluation report on the CBC pilot released just before the rollout found out that there was nothing wrong about CBC, but everything wrong about its economics.
We looked at the economic burden or the economic requirement for rolling out CBC. It gave us an astronomical figure through simulation and models. It gave us a figure of 365 billion for the first 4 grades. We needed 365 billion to roll out the first, that is pre-primary 1, pre-primary 2, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 and 4. And hence our recommendation to the then Minister, Ambassador Amina, that we start the rollout only in grade 1. Because we looked at the budget considerations. And then we walk from grade 1 to grade 2 as we go up facing out 844.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta's directive that the Ministry of Education implements CBC in early childhood development to grades 1, 2, and 3 contradicted recommendations by an evaluation team, whose findings had been accepted by the then Education Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohammed, who postponed the implementation by 1 year to allow for the issues raised by evaluators to be addressed.
CBC was rolled out. Of course, there were many challenges. We had to get teachers trained. For sure, the training they got from the very beginning was so scanty. So we had to get experts in CBC to come and carry out an in-house training. And they've really helped our teachers, especially when it comes to assessment. So many teachers didn't know how to assess the students.
Some of the challenges we are experiencing as the teachers, we need some more books, especially in some learning areas like the music, physical education, art and crafts, and music. We need more books to be provided by the government.
In April 2019, the Teacher Service Commission rolled out training for over 90,000 teachers on the implementation of CBC. However, a standoff between Kenya National Union of Teachers (NAT) and the government saw former NAT Secretary General Wilson Sossion direct teachers to boycott the training. Consequently, several teachers were interdicted. Sossion and other critics of the CBC had argued that there were no guidelines and a gazetted commission to run and direct the process, and that a due process of reforming the content of the curriculum was never followed. Other issues undercutting CBC revolve around parents and their role, with many claiming it is too expensive and very demanding.
Parents have been pushed left, right, because they are the ones who are said to be opposing CBC, but they are the best supporters of CBC. It's only that they were never engaged. The government started the system hurriedly, without involving, without engaging them, without empowering them to understand the CBC. It's one of the best curriculum, but how it was made, it was not all inclusive.
As I leave government, the most important thing I've seen in the CBC, which is the takeaway, is that we are going back to make the family. The child is going to engage the parent once again, and this is actually the most transformative aspect of CBC. In
2021, a group of lawyers moved to court seeking to stop the implementation of the competency-based curriculum, arguing that it was burdensome to parents and that the whole process lacked concrete legal standing and backing. Other critics argued that most schools lack teaching and learning materials, infrastructure, and enough teachers. Yet, even as critics maintained their onslaught on the CBC, former Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha maintained CBC was unstoppable.
The competency-based curriculum did not start with C.S. Magoha. I found the train already moving. So I took it over from there and moved it energetically together with all of you to where it is now.
Under CBC, every learner is given a tracking number at grade 3 to be used to monitor their progress through classroom assessment. Examinations under CBC entail a balance between formative and summative assessments to inform both the feedback on learning progress and transition across the various levels of education and training. Teachers say CBC assessment is all about knowledge application. While the CBC emphasizes on skills and competencies, experts say focusing so much on skills while leaving out knowledge could be counterproductive to learners.
Consolidation of knowledge is what has made the Japanese be the top world producer of, let me pick vehicles. Every second car you see on the road in Kenya is Japanese. But look at the rigors of knowledge acquisition the children go through before they then go to skills and competences acquisition. So we need to be careful. I'm also hoping that if the task force decides that we relook at this transition, I'm hoping that the grade 6, going to 7, going to 8, going to 9 will remain in primary schools.
At the end of every assessment administered from grade 1 to 6, learners earn a maximum of 20 marks, totaling to 60 at the end of grade 6, where final assessment is conducted and scored at 40%. This means grade 6 learners not only sit the school-based assessment for the 20 marks, but also write a national examination managed by NEC at the end of their primary cycle before they transition to junior secondary. Learners will then be issued with a transition report to be handed over to the teachers in the next level.
Confusion that was arising out of CBC as a principle of teaching and learning and a structure of education is being clarified, because every now and again I would hear somebody saying that let's move from CBC back to 844. 844 is a structure of education. CBC is a principle of teaching and learning. It is a principle, it's something higher, it's a philosophy of learning. And therefore, you can compare 2633 to 844. But in terms of CBC, that one is here to stay. You cannot change a principle of learning of the 21st century to take us back to where we are coming away from.
Grade 4, 5 and 6 school-based assessments assist on informing mastery of competencies and readiness of learners to transition and provide feedback to stakeholders such as learners, parents, teachers in subsequent grades and curriculum developers.
I learned how to crochet, how to knit, and that has helped me a lot because I can make my own things now and without the help of my parents.
What I've learned from my experience is that you cannot depend on one thing in life, and we've learned that not only white-collar jobs are important. You can use your creativity, imagination, and the skills you learn in class to earn an income or a living.
CBC is nice because it makes you to employ yourself and also it makes you to know your talent, and also you make money out of it.
Helping these children to know that the skills, you see, in the past, children or our generation, we used to be done everything. But you see, at this age, with these learners, the age of 8, 9, 10, they are able to know that at this point, I can be able to fry an egg. I can be able to boil milk. I can be able to boil milk and preserve it well, so that to reduce the wastage.
Since CBC was rolled out, as a teacher, I've been able to see learners being more creative. I've seen learners enjoying learning. I've seen values that are been able to develop among the learners as compared to the 844, whereby learning was focusing mainly on classwork activity.
God has given each and every one of us a gift. And you teachers are privileged to be the ones who are supposed to pull that gift out of that child and to make him use that gift to benefit himself, to grow society, to develop his country, to develop his continent, and to be proud of himself as a citizen of the Republic for the service that he delivers, whatever that service may be.
However, as learners in grade 6 sit the inaugural Kenya Primary Schools Education Assessment, KPSEA, stakeholders and professionals continue to pull in different directions on their transition. While it is true that implementing CBC has been as controversial as its rollout, the question of junior secondary and transition of learners remains just as controversial as it is divisive.
The worry for KPSEA is the transition, and that is the parent side and the school side, because they feel they need affirmation on how the children are going to be transited because of planning. For planning purposes, it should come out clearly so that parents can prepare.
By the name junior secondary is an issue, then it is not cast on stone. I don't see any issue with renaming that one to senior school or senior primary. And for the psychological treat for the boys and girls who are graduating from grade 6, we can as well give them a different set of uniform to look different, to look senior. They will be in senior school. So we are saying the best way to go to save the government headache of looking for new infrastructure in the secondary school to accommodate a double intake in 2023 January. Let's have it passed. Let the committee consider domiciling the senior school or the senior primary in primary school.
People perceiving secondary schooling in terms of physical space instead of looking at it as a concept of curriculum. So we go with the curriculum first, and then you follow with the facilities that are supposed to support that curriculum. But for us, we see secondary school in terms of moving from this physical space to another physical space, forgetting that in this country we have schools that have grade 1 up to grade 12 in the same, in the same compound. You just go through a transformation. When you are in secondary, maybe sometimes you just change the uniform.
And as many accept CBC is appropriate for the 21st century learner, it has been termed as a resource-intensive system that requires massive investment. There fears that unless the government invests enough by mobilizing adequate resources, the system could widen the already existing gaps and disparities in the country's education system, which has for long been perceived to favor the affluent. Shadrack Mitty, KTN News.